first thing I remember about heaven was that it wasn't bright. People always imagine impossible light. Endless choirs, golden streets, faces glowing with joy. I used to believe those things too. But when I finally stood there, the first thing I noticed was silence. Not peaceful silence, the kind that exists after everyone has already said goodbye. I don't know how long I remained standing beneath those enormous white gates before I realized no one was coming to greet me. There were no angels waiting with trumpets, no relatives running toward me, no overwhelming flood of emotion, only stillness. The gates behind me stretched higher than any mountain I had ever seen, disappearing into clouds that didn't move. Ahead of me lay a city unlike anything architecture should have allowed. Every building seemed carved from something that reflected light without producing it. Towers curved in impossible ways. Bridges crossed empty air, rivers flowed without sound. Nothing cast a shadow, yet nothing felt fully illuminated. I remember looking down at my own hands. They looked exactly as they had the morning I died. Older than I expected. The scar across my thumb was still there. Even the wedding ring I had buried with years before remained on my finger. That should have comforted me. Instead, it unsettled me, because I had expected to become something else. Instead, I was still me. A voice finally broke the silence. "You're early?" I turned. The man standing behind me wore no armor, no wings, no crown. Simple white robes, bare feet. Gray eyes that looked impossibly old. Not ancient in appearance, ancient in memory. He studied me the way an archivist studies an old manuscript whose ending has already been spoiled. "I don't understand," I said. "You will." His answer came without hesitation. "You always do." Something about that sentence bothered me. Not what he said, how certain he sounded. He gestured for me to follow. We walked through streets where thousands of doors lined buildings that had no visible entrances. Trees grew with silver leaves that never moved despite a wind I could hear but never feel. Sometimes distant figures crossed plazas. None acknowledged us. They weren't ignoring me. They simply seemed occupied by thoughts too vast for conversation. Eventually, I asked the question every human probably asks. "Am I dead?" The old man smiled sadly. "You've stopped asking the important question? What should I ask?" He looked toward the sky. "You should ask why you're here before your name is called." I stopped walking. "What does that mean?" He continued forward. "It means something has gone terribly wrong. For the first time since arriving, I felt fear. Not fear of punishment, not fear of judgment. Fear that heaven itself wasn't behaving the way it should. I hurried after him. "Who are you? I've held many names. Which one do you use now?" He thought for a long moment. "Names matter less here. Please." I kept records. I frowned. Records? Every soul, every prayer, every choice that changed another life, every act of mercy, every betrayal, everything. "You mean..." "Yes." "The book of life?" He didn't answer, which somehow felt like confirmation. We reached a balcony overlooking the city. Only then did I realize something impossible. There were gates everywhere, not just the one through which I had entered. Hundreds, maybe thousands, each far beyond the horizon. Each identical, each closed, every one of them. The old man noticed where I was looking. "They weren't always?" I swallowed. Where is everyone? They're where they belong? Then why is this place so empty? He closed his eyes. Because arrivals have nearly stopped. The words settled into the silence like stones sinking into deep water. Nearly? He nodded. You are one of the last. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it sounded impossible. Billions of people are alive. For now. That answer froze something inside me. What do you mean? Instead of speaking, he raised one hand toward the sky. I followed his gaze. At first, I saw nothing. Then, very slowly, the sky moved. No, not the sky. Something behind it, something unimaginably large. Imagine watching mountains breathe. Imagine oceans blinking. Imagine realizing the stars aren't distant lights. They're reflections in someone's eyes. The shape existed beyond size itself. It never fully appeared. My mind refused to assemble what it was seeing. Every time I focused on one part, another disappeared. Geometry failed, perspective collapsed. Yet I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever it was, it had been watching heaven. The entire time, the old man whispered before I could speak. It has finally reached the boundary. I felt my heartbeat returning for the first time since death. What is it? His answer came so quietly I almost missed it. We don't know. That frightened me more than anything else. Because if heaven didn't know, who could? The old man's answer lingered in the air long after he had spoken. We don't know. I had expected certainty here. If there was one place in all of existence where every mystery had an answer, surely it was this one. Instead, I found uncertainty. Not human uncertainty, the kind born from ignorance, but something deeper. The kind that comes when a truth exists beyond the reach of even those who have watched civilizations rise and disappear. Neither of us spoke for what felt like several minutes, or perhaps several years. Time had become difficult to measure. Nothing changed. The light never shifted. The air never cooled. There were no birds, no insects, no distant echoes of life, only silence. Eventually, the old man turned away from the balcony. Come. I followed, though every instinct told me to keep watching the impossible shape beyond the sky. As we descended a staircase carved from white stone, I noticed something that hadn't been there before. Tiny cracks. Hairline fractures running through the walls. They weren't large enough to threaten the structure, but they shouldn't have existed at all. This place felt eternal. Eternal things weren't supposed to crack. You've seen them, the old man said without looking back. The cracks? Yes. What caused them? He didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight I hadn't heard before. They appeared after the first gate closed. The first? There was a day, he said quietly, when no one arrived. I frowned. That doesn't sound impossible. He stopped walking. Then he looked directly into my eyes. It had never happened before. A chill ran through me, not because of the words themselves, because of the way he said them. Like someone remembering the exact moment they realized the world could end. We entered a vast hall lined with shelves that stretched farther than I could see. Books, millions of them. No, more than millions. Every shelf disappeared into a distance that ignored perspective. Some books glowed faintly. Others looked older than language itself. Some had chains. Others floated several inches above their shelves. The scent inside the hall surprised me. Old paper, ink, dust. How could heaven smell like an ancient library? The old man noticed my expression. Memory has a fragrance. I wasn't sure what that meant. He walked between towering shelves with practiced familiarity until he stopped before a single wooden table. Resting upon it was one enormous volume, bound in white leather, no title, no decoration, just a single lock. Except the lock hung open. It was never opened before, he murmured. Who opened it? No one. Then how? It opened itself. His answer settled into the room like another crack in reality. He carefully turned to the first page. The paper was blank. So was the second. The third. Hundreds of empty pages. Finally, nearly halfway through the book, writing appeared. Not ink, light. Letters forming themselves even as I watched. Names, thousands of names, each appeared, then slowly faded. I leaned closer. What are these? The living. My stomach tightened. They're disappearing. Yes, because they're dying? He shook his head. No. Then why? He looked at me with exhausted eyes. They're becoming unreachable. I stepped back. I don't understand. Neither do we. For the second time since meeting him, those words terrified me somewhere deep within the endless library. A bell rang. One single note. Low, ancient. Heavy enough that I felt it in my chest before I heard it. The old man's face changed instantly. For the first time, I saw fear. Real fear. Not concern, not sadness. Fear. Stay here. What was that? Do not move. Before I could protest, he was already hurrying deeper into the shelves. His footsteps faded quickly. Then, silence returned. I stood alone beside the enormous book. I told myself I would wait. I lasted perhaps 20 seconds. Curiosity has always been my greatest flaw. It was the reason I became an investigative journalist while I was alive. It had led me into war zones, abandoned hospitals, forgotten monasteries, and places sensible people avoided. Apparently, death hadn't cured it. I looked around. The hall remained empty. Slowly, I reached toward the book. The pages felt warm, almost alive. As my fingers brushed the paper, a name appeared. Mine. Not the name I expected. Every nickname, every title, every version of myself I'd ever believed. Child, son, husband, sinner, witness. Then, one final word formed beneath them. Last. The instant I read it, the entire library shook. Not violently, just enough for dust to fall from shelves that should never have collected dust, somewhere far above. Something enormous groaned. It wasn't the building, it sounded alive. And listening, the groan did not fade. It spread, slowly. Like thunder rolling beneath the foundations of reality itself, every shelf around me trembled. Thousands of books shivered against one another, creating a whisper unlike paper or wood. It sounded disturbingly human. Not voices, breathing. Millions of slow, synchronized breaths. I pulled my hand away from the page, but my name remained. The final word last. It glowed brighter than the others. Then another word appeared beneath it. Witness. The ink wasn't ink anymore. It looked like liquid starlight seeping through the page. My pulse quickened. Why me? The question escaped my lips before I realized I had spoken aloud. Someone answered. You asked, The voice came from directly behind me. I spun around. No one. The library stretched endlessly in every direction, every aisle perfectly still. "Who's there?" Silence then. "You always ask?" The same voice. Closer now, it sounded familiar. Not because I recognized the speaker, because I recognized myself. It was my own voice, only older, not older with age, older with experience, as though decades of unbearable memories had settled into every word. I backed away from the table. "No." The reply came immediately. "Yes." My breathing became uneven. "This isn't real." "It is now." Every instinct screamed at me to run. Instead, I searched the shelves. Nothing, no movement, no figure hiding between them. Then I noticed something impossible. The shadows? Until that moment, heaven hadn't possessed any. Now, thin strands of darkness stretched across the floor between the towering shelves. They weren't cast by anything. They simply existed, moving slowly, like ink spreading across wet paper. A hand touched my shoulder. I nearly collapsed. The old man had returned. His expression told me everything before he spoke. "You touched the book." I couldn't answer. "You weren't supposed to." There is no only." His eyes drifted to the glowing page. When he saw the final word, his face lost what little color it had. "You saw it. What does it mean?" He didn't answer. Instead, he closed the enormous volume. The instant the cover shut, every shadow vanished. The library became silent once more. Even the distant breathing disappeared. For several moments, he simply stared at the book. Finally, he whispered something so quietly, I barely heard it. It shows. We left the library without another word. Outside, the city felt different. Not because it had changed, because I had. Once you notice something impossible, everything ordinary begins to look suspicious. The streets were still empty. The silver trees remained perfectly still. The rivers continued flowing without making a sound, but now I noticed windows. Thousands of them. Every building had countless windows. None revealed an interior. Only darkness, as though every structure contained rooms that refused to be seen. "Where is everyone?" I asked again. This time the old man answered. "They're preparing." "For what?" He looked toward the distant horizon. "The closing." Those two words struck harder than any scream. "The gates? All of them?" But I struggled to find the question. "Heaven can't close?" A faint, sorrowful smile crossed his face. "Many things cannot happen." He paused. "They happen anyway." We reached another plaza. Unlike the others, this one wasn't empty. Dozens of figures stood in perfect silence around a circular pool. Angels. At least, I think they were. None resembled the paintings I'd seen in churches. They wore simple white garments. No halos, no feathered wings. Yet something about them made looking directly at them difficult. The air around them shimmered. Their faces seemed to change every time I blinked. Young, old, male, female, neither, both. My mind refused to settle on a single image. All of them were staring into the water. No one spoke. No one moved. The old man joined them. After several hesitant steps, I looked into the pool. There was no reflection. Instead, I saw Earth. Clouds drifted over continents. Cities glittered beneath the night. Storms crossed oceans. Everything appeared normal. Until I noticed the lights. Across the planet, tiny lights were going out. One by one, not cities, people, each light vanished silently. No explosions, no disasters, simply gone. "What am I looking at?" I whispered. The old man answered without taking his eyes off the water. "Hope." I frowned. "It doesn't look like hope. It is what remains of it." Then, one of the angels finally spoke. Its voice sounded like dozens of voices speaking as one. "It has crossed the first veil." Every head lowered. Even the old man closed his eyes. My stomach tightened. "What crossed?" No one answered me. Instead, the water rippled, not from anything touching it, from something approaching slowly. An enormous shadow began rising beneath the surface. It wasn't in the pool. It was beyond it, beyond Earth, beyond the stars themselves. And as its outline became clearer, every angel in the plaza took one synchronized step backward. For the first time since arriving in heaven, I realized I wasn't watching something evil. I was watching something that even heaven had never expected to meet. The shadow beneath the water did not continue rising. It stopped. Not because something restrained it, because it knew we had seen it. An awareness settled over the plaza so suddenly that I forgot how to breathe. It wasn't looking at Earth anymore. It was looking through Earth, past the stars, past the angels, past the city, toward us, toward me. Without warning, every surface of the pool became perfectly black. The image of Earth vanished. No stars, no reflections, just an impossible darkness that seemed deeper than space itself. Then every angel spoke together, not loudly, almost reverently. "Do not answer if it speaks." The words echoed through the square. I turned toward the old man. "What does that mean?" His eyes remained fixed on the pool. "It has never spoken before." "But if it does?" He swallowed. "I don't know." Again, those words. "I don't know." The phrase had become more terrifying than any monster could ever be. A ripple crossed the black surface. One, then another. There was no sound, no splash. The ripples simply appeared, spreading outward in perfect circles. At the center, a single point of white light emerged. It wasn't bright. It was absence, like a hole punched through darkness itself. The point slowly widened. An eye, not an eye made of flesh, an eye made of impossible geometry. Every ring surrounding its pupil rotated in a different direction, some clockwise, some backward, some in ways my mind couldn't follow. Looking at it for more than a heartbeat made my vision blur. One of the angels collapsed to one knee, another covered its face. The old man grabbed my arm. "Look away." "I can't." "I know." His grip tightened. "That's why you must." I forced myself to lower my eyes. The instant I did, the pressure inside my skull eased, as though something had nearly reached into my thoughts. A whisper drifted across the plaza. It wasn't heard through my ears. It formed directly inside my mind. Not words, recognition. The feeling of being remembered by someone I had never met. Then, one sentence appeared inside my thoughts. "You left before the door closed." My blood ran cold. I hadn't spoken. No one had. Yet I understood every syllable. The old man looked at me sharply. "You heard it?" It wasn't a question. I nodded. His face fell. "So it has begun?" "What has?" Before he could answer, the eye vanished. The pool pool returned to clear water. Earth reappeared. Everything looked normal again. Too normal. As though the last minute had never happened. One by one, the angels quietly dispersed. None spoke. None looked at one another. Each walked away carrying the expression of someone attending the funeral of eternity itself. The old man led me away from the plaza at a pace much faster than before. Where are we going? Somewhere it cannot easily hear. You think it heard us? It hears everything. Then why move? Because listening and understanding are not the same. We entered a narrow passage between two enormous buildings. Unlike the shining avenues we'd crossed earlier, this place felt old, very old. The white stone walls were worn smooth by countless hands. Symbols had been carved into them. Thousands, circles, stars, eyes, trees, open hands, broken crowns. None resembled any alphabet I knew. I paused beside one carving. It depicted a gate, standing open. Above it floated 7 stars. Below it, one small figure walking away. My breath caught. The figure looked exactly like me. No, I whispered. That's impossible. The old man didn't seem surprised. It wasn't carved for you. Then why? It was carved long before your world existed. I stared at the weathered stone. Every detail matched. The shape of the shoulders, the slight limp in the left leg I'd carried since a motorcycle accident at 23. Even the ring on the figure's hand. My ring. I slowly stepped backward. Who am I? For the first time since I'd arrived, the old man hesitated before answering. I was hoping, his voice almost broke, that you would tell us. A cold wind swept through the passage, the first wind I had felt since entering heaven. It carried no scent, no warmth, only one distant sound, a gate. Moving, not opening, closing slowly. Somewhere beyond the endless city, one of heaven's great gates had begun to shut. The sound reached us again. Not loud, not violent, just a slow, measured groan, like stone being pulled across stone by hands older than time. The old man stopped walking. He didn't need to ask which gate it was. He already knew. His shoulders sagged, not with surprise, but with the exhaustion of someone watching a nightmare finally become inevitable. It has begun, he whispered. No, I said. You told me heaven has countless gates. It did? The correction was almost too quiet to hear. I looked back toward the distant skyline. From here, I could see only the highest arches of one of the great gates. Its brilliant white surface had begun to darken. Not with shadow, with age. As if thousands of years were passing across it every second. Tiny fragments drifted from its surface like snow, except snow melts? These pieces simply vanished before touching the ground. Who closes them? I asked. The old man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he knelt beside the ancient wall and placed his palm against one of the carved symbols. The stone responded. A faint golden glow spread through the carving before fading again. Long ago, he said, every gate opened from both sides. I frowned. Both sides? He nodded. The living believed heaven welcomed souls. It does. Yes. But heaven also watched the living. That sentence lingered. I had never imagined heaven as something that watched. Not judged, not ruled, watched. There was, he searched for the right word, a communion. What happened to it? It weakened because humanity changed? In part. And the other part? His eyes lifted toward the sky. Something noticed the door? We continued deeper into the narrow passage until it opened into a courtyard unlike any I had seen since arriving. The buildings here were older, much older. No gleaming towers, no silver trees, only weathered stone and quiet fountains whose water flowed upward instead of down. At the center stood a single tree. His branches were completely bare, yet thousands of leaves covered the ground beneath it. None were dying. Each leaf shimmered like polished glass. I bent to pick one up. Before my fingers touched it, the old man spoke sharply. "Don't." I froze. "Why?" "Those are memories." I slowly withdrew my hand. "Whose memories?" He looked at the tree. "The ones heaven refuses to forget." The courtyard was empty. Almost. Someone sat beneath the tree, an old woman. She wore simple gray clothing. Her white hair fell almost to the ground. She seemed completely ordinary, until she looked up. Her eyes reflected the night sky, not metaphorically, literally. Stars moved within them. Entire constellations drifted across her irises. She smiled. "I wondered when you'd arrive." I stopped. "You know me? I've been waiting a very long time." The old man bowed his head respectfully. "You shouldn't be here," he said. She chuckled softly. "Neither should he." Then she looked directly at me. "Tell me." Her voice was gentle. "When you died, what was the last thing you saw?" The question caught me off guard. "My apartment?" "No." "The last thing?" I searched my memory. Everything after my heart stopped had become strangely blurred. The ambulance, the ceiling, darkness, then something else. Something I hadn't remembered until that moment. A door. Neither of them moved. "It wasn't in my apartment," I continued. "It was standing alone. Describe it." It was... The words caught in my throat. It wasn't beautiful. It wasn't frightening. It was just... open. The old woman's smile disappeared. The old man quietly closed his eyes. "What?" I asked. "What does that mean?" The woman answered. "It means... you entered before you were called?" Silence swallowed the courtyard. I stared at them. "That's impossible." "It should be. I died." "Yes. So I belonged here." She slowly shook her head. "No." A pressure settled in my chest. "What are you saying?" "You crossed the threshold, but you were never summoned." I laughed nervously. There has to be a mistake. There has never been one. Her certainty frightened me more than anger would have. If I wasn't supposed to arrive, I could barely force out the next question. Then who was? Neither answered. Instead, the tree overhead shivered, not from wind, from absence. One leaf detached from a branch that had appeared completely bare only moments before. It drifted silently downward, landing at my feet, unlike the others. This leaf wasn't transparent, it was black. The old woman's expression changed instantly. "No," she whispered. "It has found this place." Before I could ask what she meant, every fountain in the courtyard stopped flowing at once. The silence that followed was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It wasn't the absence of sound. It was the absence of permission for sound to exist. Even my breathing disappeared. My heartbeat gone. The old man slowly looked toward the entrance to the courtyard. There was no one there. Yet, Something had arrived. And for the first time since I entered heaven, the old man took a single step backward. The old man's retreat was almost imperceptible. One step, no more. Yet it shattered every illusion I had been clinging to. Since arriving here, I had watched him speak calmly about impossible things. He had stood beneath the sky, hiding something beyond comprehension. He had opened the book without trembling. Even when the gates began to close, sorrow outweighed fear in his face. But now, he stepped back. Whatever had entered the courtyard was something he had hoped never to encounter. The old woman rose slowly beneath the barren tree. She wasn't frightened. She looked disappointed, like someone whose final hope had quietly slipped away. "It learned," she said. The old man nodded once. "Faster than we predicted? I told you prediction was a luxury." "I know." Neither of them looked toward the entrance anymore. Instead, both looked at me. My mouth had gone dry. "Why are you looking at me?" Neither answered. The silence remained absolute. I tried to hear my own breathing. Nothing. Not even the rustle of my clothes. The entire courtyard had become detached from reality itself. Then, footsteps. 1, 2, 3. They echoed from the stone corridor leading into the courtyard. Strangely, the footsteps sounded familiar. Too familiar. Like my own shoes striking pavement. Another step. Another. Closer. A figure emerged. At first I thought I was looking into a mirror. Same height, same build, same face, same scar across the thumb, same wedding ring, even the tiny wrinkle beside the left eye. He was me. Only one detail differed: his expression. Mine had become frozen in confusion. His carried unbearable exhaustion. He looked as though he had spent centuries trying and failing to warn someone. When our eyes met, he smiled sadly. I wondered how long it would take. Every muscle in my body locked. "No." The word escaped as a whisper. "No?" The other me nodded. I said the same thing. Neither the old man nor the old woman seemed surprised, which somehow made everything worse. I pointed at the stranger. "Who is he?" The old woman answered quietly. "That depends." "On what? Which one of you asks first?" The other me looked at the ground. "She's still doing that?" The old man sighed. "Some habits survive eternity." I couldn't think, I couldn't breathe. My mind searched desperately for explanations. Hallucination, memory, judgment, dream. None survived more than a second. Because he moved exactly as I moved. When I shifted my weight, he didn't mirror me. He anticipated me, as though he'd already lived this conversation. Finally, he spoke again. "You've already touched the book?" "Yes." "You saw the word?" "Last." He closed his eyes. "I was afraid of that." "You saw it too?" He opened them. "No. I became it." The courtyard seemed colder. "I don't understand." "You won't." His voice cracked with sorrow. "Not until you remember dying." "I remember dying." He slowly shook his head. "No." "You remember stopping." "You don't remember crossing." The old woman quietly picked up the black leaf that had fallen earlier. She turned it over in her hand. "It shouldn't exist." The other me laughed softly. "It didn't. Until..." He looked directly into my eyes. "Until I came back." The words struck like ice. "Came back," he nodded. "I left." "Left where?" "Heaven." Silence. No one interrupted him. I was the last man to leave before the gates closed. My heart stopped. Those words, the title of everything, I'd assumed it referred to me, but this man, this impossible version of me, spoke them as memory. I don't believe you. I know. I've never been here before. He smiled again. You've only forgotten. Without warning, the ground beneath the courtyard vibrated, not violently, rhythmically, like an enormous heartbeat. Once, twice, 3 times. Each pulse spread through the stone beneath our feet. The fountains remained frozen. The tree's branches bent toward the entrance. Every glass-like leaf began trembling. The old man's face hardened. We're out of time. The old woman closed her eyes. So soon? The other me looked toward the corridor. He found the thread. My voice barely worked. What thread? Instead of answering, he walked toward me. 1 step, 2, 3. He stopped less than an arm's length away, then leaned forward until only I could hear him. When he spoke, his voice was almost identical to mine. If anyone asks you whether you remember the 7th gate, he paused. Lie. Before I could ask why, a deafening crack split the sky above heaven. For the first time since my arrival, a piece of the sky itself broke open, and something on the other side looked in. A sound followed the crack, not an explosion, not thunder. It reminded me of a page being torn, only the page was the sky itself. Everyone in the courtyard looked upward. No one spoke. The wound stretching across heaven wasn't wide. At first glance, it looked like a thin fracture in glass, but it wasn't getting wider. It was getting deeper. Beyond it, there was no darkness, no stars, no light, just an absence that my mind refused to describe. Every instinct insisted I wasn't looking at another place. I was looking at the end of places. The other me took a slow step backward. His eyes never left the fracture. It's earlier this time. The old man frowned. Earlier? He nodded. Much earlier. What does that mean? I demanded. Neither of them answered immediately. Finally, the old woman spoke. It means the pattern has changed. What pattern? She looked at me with unbearable sadness. The one we've already lived. A chill climbed my spine. Already lived? I looked from one face to another. No. The word escaped almost involuntarily. No. You're talking like this has happened before. The other me finally looked at me again. It has. That's impossible? So is heaven closing? The fracture overhead pulsed once. The entire city answered. Far away. One gate slammed shut. Unlike the first gate I'd heard, this one didn't groan. It struck with finality. The sound rolled across heaven like a judge's hammer. Then, something extraordinary happened. The light changed. For the first time since I'd arrived, the white glow bathing the city dimmed. Not by much. Just enough for shadows to appear beneath the buildings. Real shadows. Long, cold. Moving in directions that didn't match anything around them. The old man whispered, "We're losing the horizon." The horizon? I asked. The boundary that separates what belongs here? He looked toward the fracture, from what never should. Without warning, every glass leaf beneath the tree lifted into the air, thousands of them. None touched by wind. They simply floated upward until they surrounded the black leaf the old woman still held. She closed her hand around it. Instantly, every other leaf shattered. Not into pieces, into memories. Images exploded through the courtyard. A little girl laughing beside a river. An old soldier kneeling in prayer. A mother singing to a newborn. A lonely monk lighting a candle. A terrified child hiding beneath a staircase. Millions of moments. None lasting more than a heartbeat. Each one vanished before I could understand it. I stumbled backward. "What is this?" the old woman answered softly. "Everything heaven chose to remember." Another memory flashed. This one lasted longer. A man stood before one of heaven's enormous gates. His back faced me. He wore ordinary clothes, a wedding ring, a scar across his thumb. My breath caught. It was me. Or the other me. The gate slowly opened. Instead of entering, he walked out toward darkness. The memory ended. Every remaining image vanished. The courtyard became silent once again. "You left willingly," I whispered. The other me nodded. "Yes." "Why?" His answer came without hesitation. "To save everyone inside." Did it work? He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The crack in the sky answered for him. A low vibration spread beneath our feet. The old man suddenly turned toward the city. "They've started." "Started what?" He looked at me. "The bell." Almost immediately, a deep tone echoed across heaven. One note, then another, then another. Slow, measured. The sound wasn't warning anyone. It was counting. 1, silence 2, silence 3. Each note seemed farther apart than the last. "What is it counting?" I asked. The old woman's expression became grim. "The gates." The other me grabbed my wrist. His grip was surprisingly warm. "You have to remember." "I don't remember any of this." "You do." "I don't." He leaned closer. "You remember the hallway." A faint image flickered through my mind. A hallway, white walls, hospital lights, machines beeping. "No." "You remember the door?" The memory became clearer. A single door, standing where no door should exist. Its handle already turning. "You touched it." You opened it." My breathing became ragged. The old man stepped toward us. "Don't force him." "We don't have time." "You could break him." "He already is." The other me looked back at me. "Tell me one thing." "What?" "When you crossed," he hesitated. "Did someone invite you?" The question struck something deep inside me. A voice, soft, gentle, not commanding, simply asking, "Will you come?" I had forgotten it until now. My knees nearly gave out. I heard someone. The other me closed his eyes. I knew it. The old woman whispered. Then the invitation was accepted. The old man's face drained of what little color remained. Before anyone could explain, the fourth bell rang, and somewhere beyond the endless city, the third gate closed. This time, something screamed on the other side. The scream lasted only a heartbeat. Then it was cut off, not as though the creature had stopped screaming, as though the universe itself had decided that sound no longer belonged to it. The silence that followed was worse. It pressed against my ears until they ached. I looked toward the horizon where the third gate had closed. Nothing. No light, no movement, only an empty stretch of white mist. Yet every instinct told me something was standing there, just beyond what I was allowed to perceive. Watching. Waiting. The old man slowly released a breath. 3. No one corrected him. No one needed to. The bells had become heaven's clock, not measuring time, measuring endings. How many gates are left? I asked. He hesitated. There used to be countless. Used to be? He nodded. Now? His voice became almost inaudible. They disappear from memory when they close? A cold knot formed in my stomach. What do you mean? He looked directly at me. Tell me. How many gates have you seen since arriving? I answered immediately. I don't know. The realization struck halfway through the sentence. I had seen hundreds from the balcony. I remembered that, but now I couldn't picture them. Not even one. Their shapes had blurred into something my mind refused to reconstruct. It felt like trying to remember a dream that dissolved the moment I woke. They're being forgotten, I whispered. No, the old man replied. They're being removed. The other me took a slow step toward the barren tree. He rested his hand against its trunk. For the first time, the tree reacted. A single branch bent toward him, like an old friend recognizing someone it had lost. It still remembers me? The old woman watched with quiet sorrow. For now. He closed his eyes. I hoped it wouldn't. Why? Because memory is how it follows us, I frowned. It? He looked toward the crack spreading across the sky. You keep asking what it is. Yes. He shook his head. That's the wrong question. Then what should I ask? His answer came so softly I almost missed it. You should ask why it needs someone to remember it. The words echoed through my thoughts. Why it needs someone to remember it. I had spent my entire life believing monsters hunted people. Now I wondered if some horrors survived only because they were remembered. Before I could ask another question, the ground beneath the courtyard shifted. Not a tremor, a movement. The entire city seemed to inhale. Every building leaned inward by the slightest degree. Every fountain tilted. Even the crack in the sky curved downward, as though heaven itself had turned its attention toward one place, the entrance to the courtyard. Footsteps. Again. Slow. Measured. But these weren't mine, nor were they human. Each step sounded different. Stone, water, leaves, glass, whispers. Every footfall carried a different sound, yet they belonged to a single walker. No one appeared, only the footsteps. Drawing closer. The old woman whispered a sentence in a language I didn't recognize. The air around us shimmered. The old man placed one hand over his heart. The other me lowered his head. None of them were preparing to fight. They were preparing to endure. The footsteps stopped. The corridor remained empty. Then, a shadow appeared, not cast upon the ground. Growing from it, it stretched impossibly long before slowly rising upright. There was still no body, only a silhouette, featureless, perfectly black, except for one detail. Its outline wasn't stable. Every few seconds it resembled someone different. A child, an old woman, a soldier, a priest, a king, a beggar. Then, me. For less than a heartbeat before changing again, the shadow spoke. Its voice wasn't terrifying. It was heartbreakingly familiar. It sounded like the voice of someone I had loved, yet could no longer remember. I have come. A pause. For the witness. The old man's answer was immediate. There is no witness here. The shadow tilted what should have been its head. There is always one. Its attention drifted toward me, not its face. It had none. Yet I felt its gaze, cold, patient, curious. You crossed. I couldn't answer. You were invited? My heart pounded. How did it know? You accepted? The old woman stepped between us. He remembers nothing. The shadow remained still. Not yet. Then, after a long silence, it asked a question that froze every soul in the courtyard. Would you like to remember? What heaven erased? I stared at the shadow. Every instinct screamed the same warning. Don't answer. The angel's words returned with startling clarity. Do not answer if it speaks. At the time, I had assumed they meant a conversation. Now I understood. Questions were answers. Silence was an answer. Even fear could become an answer. The shadow waited, patiently, as though time itself had no meaning to it. I asked him a question. Its voice remained impossibly gentle. I did not command him. No one moved. The old woman kept herself between us. The old man's hand slowly tightened around the sleeve of his robe. The other me looked defeated, not frightened, defeated, like a man watching history choose the same road once again. Finally, he spoke. Don't. His voice was barely above a whisper. Whatever you hear next, don't become curious. I almost laughed. Curious? That had been my entire life. It was curiosity that had made me a journalist. Curiosity that had made me open forgotten archives, interview dying priests, and spend nights inside abandoned churches, searching for stories no one else believed. Even now, standing in heaven itself, curiosity burned stronger than fear. The other me saw it in my eyes. He closed his own. I remember making that exact face. The shadow slowly extended one hand, except it wasn't really a hand. It kept changing, an elderly hand, a child's. One scarred by fire, one covered in ink, one missing 2 fingers. Each lasted less than a second before becoming another. Finally settled into a hand identical to mine. The same scar across the thumb, the same wedding ring. My stomach tightened. You see? The shadow whispered. You've always known me. I've never seen you. No, you've forgotten seeing me. Without warning, the air around us rippled, not outward, backward, like reality itself had inhaled. The courtyard disappeared. For less than a heartbeat. I wasn't standing beneath the tree anymore. I stood in a hospital corridor. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Rain struck a window somewhere nearby. I smelled antiseptic. Heard hurried footsteps, someone shouting, "Clear!" Pain exploded through my chest. Then the courtyard returned. I stumbled. The old man caught my arm. Stay here. His voice sounded distant. You almost crossed. I know. The shadow hadn't moved, yet somehow it stood closer. I didn't show you anything. It sounded almost amused. I merely stopped someone from hiding it. The old woman answered sharply. Memory is mercy. For some. The shadow tilted its head. For him, its attention settled on me once more. Do you know what happened after your heart stopped? I squeezed my eyes shut. I died. No. I came here. No. The word echoed strangely, not through the courtyard, through me. You chose. The other me suddenly stepped between us. Enough. The shadow looked at him. You returned. I did. And yet, a long silence as nothing changed. Pain crossed the other man's face. No. It became worse. The shadow nodded. As expected. Those two words disturbed me more than anything else. As expected. As though every choice had already been calculated. The old man slowly raised his hand. For the first time, I noticed the ring on his finger. Not gold, not silver, white. Almost translucent, it glowed faintly. Every symbol carved into the courtyard walls answered. One by one, ancient markings awakened. Golden lines spread across the stone. The air grew heavier. The shadow looked around, not alarmed, interested. So, it said quietly, you remember the covenant? The old man's expression hardened. We remember enough. Do you? The shadow smiled. Or perhaps the darkness only bent in a way my mind interpreted as a smile. Tell him? No one spoke. Tell your witness. Why heaven built gates. Silence, the shadow continued. Tell him what was kept outside. The old woman lowered her eyes. Still, no answer. Then the shadow laughed. Not loudly, not cruelly. Sadly. Even now, you cannot bear to remember your first fear. The fourth bell echoed across heaven once more. Only this time it did not stop after a single note. A second bell answered, then a third, then dozens. Soon the entire city rang together, hundreds of ancient bells, not in harmony, in warning. The sound rolled across heaven like an ocean of bronze. Far beyond the city, the crack in the sky widened, not by inches, by miles. For the first time, something crossed the fracture, not a creature, not a hand, not an eye, a single feather, black. It drifted downward through the impossible wound. None of the angels were there to catch it. None of the guardians moved. The feather floated slowly toward the city, toward us. The old man whispered words that made every hair on my body stand on end. It found the entrance. The feather touched the ground, and the stone beneath it remembered darkness. The black feather rested on the white stone. It weighed almost nothing, yet the entire courtyard groaned beneath it. A crack spread outward from the point of contact, not through the stone itself, but through something deeper. It looked as though the light trapped inside the floor had fractured. The glowing symbols surrounding us flickered, one by one, like candles struggling against an unseen wind. No wind existed, yet every flame bent toward the feather. No, the old woman whispered. It remembered. The shadow inclined its head. It never forgot. The old man stepped forward for the first time since the shadow had appeared. His voice carried an authority I hadn't heard before. You have crossed no boundary. The shadow answered calmly. I did not. Its shifting silhouette turned toward the feather. You invited remembrance. The words made no sense. I looked at the feather. It hadn't moved. Yet, the longer I stared at it, the less certain I became that it was a feather. Sometimes it looked like burnt parchment, sometimes a strip of black cloth, sometimes a long human eyelash. Every blink changed it. Every glance contradicted the last. My head began to ache. The other me noticed immediately. Don't focus on it. I can't help it, I know. He took my shoulders firmly. It isn't changing. You are. His sentence hit me harder than I expected. What? The more you look, his expression darkened. The more your mind reshapes itself to understand something it was never built to see. The old woman slowly opened her hand. The black leaf she had been holding had turned to gray dust. It slipped silently through her fingers. The tree has begun forgetting. The old man closed his eyes. Then we've already failed. I couldn't stay silent any longer. Someone tell me what's happening. My voice echoed across the courtyard. This time, the echo answered differently. What's happening? Then, a second echo. What happened? Then, a third. Happened? Each repetition sounded older, wearier, until the final echo was spoken in my own voice, only decades older. The other me slowly lowered his head. He hears through memory now. The shadow never moved. It didn't need to. I offered only truth. No, the old man replied. You offered recognition. They are often mistaken for one another. Silence followed. Then the shadow asked another question, not to me, to the old man. Do you still keep the empty name? For the first time, the old man flinched, only slightly. But I saw it, the shadow noticed too, so... You never destroyed it, the old woman spoke sharply. It cannot be destroyed. Precisely. I looked between them. The empty name? No one answered. The other me did. It's the first thing ever erased. Erased by who? He swallowed. No one knows. What was it? He stared at me for several seconds. Finally, I've spent centuries trying to remember. His voice cracked. I still can't. A sudden burst of brilliant white light erupted beneath the feather. The entire courtyard was flooded with it. Instinctively, I shielded my eyes. When the light faded, the feather was gone. So was the shadow. Only the silence remained. For several long moments, no one spoke. Then the old man whispered the words I dreaded hearing. It didn't leave. I slowly lowered my hands. What do you mean? He looked at me. His eyes were filled with a grief so profound it seemed older than heaven itself. It entered. My stomach tightened. Entered where? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he raised one trembling finger. Not toward the sky, not toward the gate, toward my chest. I looked down. There, over my heart, beneath the fabric of my clothes, a tiny black mark had appeared. It looked exactly like a feather, except it was slowly sinking beneath my skin. The black mark sank beneath my skin, not quickly, not painfully. It simply disappeared, as though my heart had opened for a single moment and accepted it. I clawed at my shirt. Nothing. No wound, no blood, no scar, only the memory of seeing it. I don't feel anything. The old man answered without relief. You won't. The old woman slowly closed her eyes. Not until it remembers where it is. What entered me? I demanded. Neither answered. The other me did. A question? I stared at him. What? It never enters as a creature. It enters as a question. He looked toward the empty place where the shadow had stood. You spend the rest of your existence trying to answer it. The bells stopped. Every one of them. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It felt expectant, as though heaven itself were listening for something. Then, a child laughed. The sound came from somewhere beyond the courtyard, clear, bright, completely ordinary. Every face around me changed. The old man became pale. The old woman whispered a prayer I couldn't understand. The other me shut his eyes. "No," he breathed. "You found one? A child?" I asked. "There's someone else here?" "No," the old man answered instantly. "There shouldn't be. But I heard—" "I know what you heard." His voice shook. "That isn't the same thing." The laughter came again, closer. It echoed through the stone passage leading into the courtyard. One laugh, then silence. Another. It sounded happy, completely innocent, which somehow made it infinitely more terrifying. Because since arriving in heaven, I hadn't heard anyone laugh, not once. The old woman suddenly looked at me. "When you were 6. My breath caught. "Did you lose your way in a forest?" I froze. I had. No one knew that story, not even my wife. I had wandered away during a family picnic. They found me hours later, crying, unable to explain where I'd been. "How?" I whispered. She ignored the question. "What did you hear?" The memory surfaced with painful clarity. I heard someone laughing. The courtyard became perfectly still. The other me slowly lowered his head. "I remember." I looked at him. "You remember because you're me?" He nodded. "No. I remember because that's when it first learned your name." The words struck like ice. "That's impossible." "You never found your way back." He spoke gently. "You were led back." By whom? The question formed in my mind. But before I could ask it, the child's laughter stopped. A tiny voice echoed through the corridor, barely louder than a whisper. "Are you coming?" Every instinct inside me screamed. The hospital. The door, the voice. "Will you come?" It was the same voice. Exactly the same, not older, not younger, identical. The invitation I had heard while dying hadn't been the first. The old man stepped directly in front of me. "Do not answer." The old woman added quietly, "Do not even think the words." My pulse hammered. The voice came again, closer now. "I know the way home." Something inside my chest tightened. The place where the black feather had vanished began to feel warm, not hot. Warm, like a hand resting gently over my heart. The other me stared at me with growing horror. "It recognizes you." "I don't understand." "You will." He almost sounded desperate. "And when you do," he swallowed hard, "don't forgive yourself." Soft footsteps echoed through the passage. Unlike before, these were unmistakably human. Small bare feet. 1, 2, 3. A tiny silhouette appeared at the entrance to the courtyard. A little boy, no older than 6. He wore simple white clothes. His dark hair fell across his forehead. His face remained hidden in shadow. One small hand rested against the stone wall. The other held a white feather. He slowly lifted his head. My entire body went numb. Because I knew him, not from heaven, not from earth, from a dream I had every year since childhood. A dream I'd always forgotten by morning. Until now. The boy smiled. Then he spoke the words that made the old man fall to his knees. "You promised you'd come back for me." The old man collapsed as though every ounce of strength had left him. Not gracefully, not slowly. His knees struck the white stone with a crack that echoed through the courtyard. The old woman closed her eyes. A single tear rolled down her face. She did not wipe it away. The other me simply stared at the child. His lips trembled. "I prayed," he whispered. that you would never remember him. I looked from one face to another. What is happening? No one answered. The little boy waited patiently. He didn't move. He didn't smile again. He simply watched me with eyes that were far older than any child's had a right to be. Then I noticed something impossible. He wasn't casting a shadow. Instead, the light around him was. A faint white glow stretched across the ground behind him like a reversed shadow, flowing toward the crack in the sky instead of away from it. I had never seen light behave that way. Neither had heaven. I knew because everyone else had noticed it too. The boy lifted the white feather. You dropped this. His voice was gentle, almost affectionate. I instinctively touched my chest. The warmth beneath my skin grew stronger. I've never seen that feather. You did. I haven't. You don't remember. Every answer he gave sounded like a memory rather than a conversation. The old woman finally opened her eyes. Don't let him hand it to you. Her voice was calm, not frightened, certain. The boy looked at her. I wasn't offering. He smiled politely. I was returning. A silence fell that somehow felt even heavier than before. The old man slowly stood. His knees were shaking. You cannot return what was surrendered. The child tilted his head. I agree. Then why bring it here? Because I looked directly at me. He asked me to. My pulse stopped. The words died in my throat for the briefest instant. Something flashed through my mind. Rain. A wooden door. My hand reaching into brilliant light. And a little boy crying. The memory vanished before I could grasp it. The other me saw the change in my face. His expression turned to despair. It's starting, the old man whispered. The seal is weakening. What seal? I asked. No one answered. Instead, every carved symbol surrounding the courtyard dimmed, one after another, like stars disappearing before sunrise. The child watched them with quiet fascination. I forgot how beautiful they were. You were never here, the old man replied. The boy looked almost offended. That's true. A pause. But he was. He pointed at me. No. I stepped backward. I've never seen this place. The child nodded sympathetically. I know. You keep saying that because you keep believing it. He took one tiny step forward. Nobody tried to stop him, not because they didn't want to, because they couldn't. The old man strained against something invisible, his feet refusing to move. The old woman gripped the trunk of the barren tree, her knuckles turning white. Even the other me stood frozen. Only I could move. Only I could step toward the child, or away from him. I have something for you. The boy slowly opened his free hand. Inside rested a key. It was unlike any key I'd ever seen. White, smooth, without teeth. Its surface reflected no light. Yet I knew immediately it belonged to a door, not any door, the door. The one I'd seen in the hospital, the one standing alone in impossible light. The one I'd somehow forgotten. The instant I saw the key, a sharp pain exploded behind my eyes. Another memory surfaced, not complete, just a fragment. I was lying in the hospital bed. Machines screamed around me, doctors were shouting, then everything became quiet. The room disappeared. The hallway appeared. At its end, the white door stood open, and beside it, a little boy waited, holding out the same key. I remember. The words escaped before I could stop them. The child's smile faded, not into sadness, into relief. As I hoped. The other me shouted, "Don't!" But it was too late. The moment I admitted the memory, the crack in the sky widened with a deafening roar. The bells of heaven rang all at once, not as a warning, as recognition, far beyond the city. Another gate closed, then another, then another. This time they did not wait between each sound, one after another. The gates began closing in rapid succession. The old man looked toward the horizon with horror. "We're losing them," the old woman whispered. "Not the gates." She looked at me. "The choices." The child raised the key a little higher. I kept my promise. My voice barely worked. "What promise?" He answered with the same gentle certainty he had shown since arriving. "The one you made before you were born." Every soul in the courtyard fell silent. Even the other me looked at the child as if hearing those words for the first time. Then, for the first time since this impossible journey began, I wasn't afraid of the shadow beyond the sky. I was afraid that somewhere inside me, I already knew the child was telling the truth. The child's words settled over the courtyard like fresh snow. No one argued. No one denied them. That frightened me more than the words themselves. I searched the faces around me, hoping someone would laugh, call it a lie, dismiss it as another trick. Instead, I saw grief. Not the grief of people hearing something impossible. The grief of people hearing something they had spent an eternity trying to forget. "You promised before you were born." The sentence repeated in my mind. Again and again, I shook my head violently. No. I couldn't have. I didn't exist. The child looked at me with a kindness that somehow felt unbearable. "You think existence begins with birth?" He glanced toward the crack spreading across heaven. "That's how humans survive." The old man finally found his voice. Enough. It wasn't loud, yet every glowing symbol surrounding the courtyard answered. Golden light erupted from the stone. Ancient circles, stars, and inscriptions blazed to life. The air became heavy. The child watched the symbols with quiet admiration. "I always liked this place." "You were never permitted here?" "No." He smiled softly. "I wasn't." The old man extended his hand. The white ring upon his finger began shining brighter than the sun. For the first time, I felt genuine power, not violence, authority. The kind that belongs to laws older than creation itself. I invoked the first covenant. Every symbol in the courtyard answered. The ground trembled. The barren tree burst into brilliant white light. Thousands of transparent leaves suddenly reappeared upon its branches. The entire courtyard seemed to awaken. For a heartbeat, hope returned. Then the child quietly asked, "Which one?" The light faltered. The old man's expression froze. "You remember, there was more than one." The child took another small step. "The first covenant? Or the first one you still remember?" The light around the courtyard dimmed, not because the child had done anything, because doubt had entered. The old man's hand slowly lowered. His voice almost disappeared. He couldn't finish. The child nodded sadly. "I know." I looked toward the other me. "What is he talking about?" He didn't answer immediately. His eyes remained fixed on the old man. Finally, he whispered, "Memory." "What about it?" "He doesn't erase it. He rearranges it. Who? Heaven? The sentence struck me harder than the crack in the sky. Heaven changes memories? No. The other me corrected himself. It protects minds from truths they cannot survive. He looked at the child. But sometimes, protection becomes forgetting. The child slowly held the white key toward me again. It floated from his palm, not quickly, not magically, as though the air itself had decided to carry it. The key drifted between us, stopping exactly halfway. No one touched it, no one even breathed. I stared at it. The smooth white surface reflected something impossible, not my face. Another life. I saw myself wearing unfamiliar clothes, standing beneath a sky filled with constellations I had never seen. No earth, no sun, just endless light. And beside me, the same little boy, except he wasn't smiling. He was crying. I heard my own voice, not from this life, from that memory. If one of us goes through and the other must wait. The vision vanished. The key became an ordinary piece of white metal again. I staggered backward. No. My hands began shaking uncontrollably. I heard myself. The child nodded. Yes. The old woman looked at me with profound sadness. Fragments. What? They're returning? Those weren't my memories. She hesitated. They belong to you? They can't. Not from your human life. A silence followed. Then she finished the sentence. From the one before. Before I could even process those words, a horn echoed across heaven. Unlike the bells, this sound was alive, deep, ancient, filled with urgency. Every face changed instantly. The old man looked toward the city. They've reached the inner gates. The other me turned pale. Already? They're moving faster? The child lowered his eyes. He has begun running. A cold pressure settled in my chest. Who? No one answered. Instead, the ground beneath the city began to pulse. Not like a heartbeat this time, like footsteps. Enormous footsteps. Each one impossibly distant. Yet every step made the white stone beneath my feet vibrate. 1. The mountains beyond the city shifted. 2. The river stopped flowing. 3. Every window in every building became completely black. 4. The crack in the sky widened enough for something immense to press gently against it from the other side. Not forcing its way in, simply waiting. Then, for the first time, I saw part of its outline clearly. It wasn't a face. It wasn't a beast. It wasn't anything that should have existed. It looked like an enormous doorway. And standing inside that impossible doorway was a single human silhouette, watching me. The other me slowly whispered words that stole the last of the hope from the courtyard. He found the one who never came back. The words echoed through the courtyard. He found the one who never came back. No one asked who. No one needed to. Every face carried the same expression. The terrible recognition of a prophecy finally reaching its last line. I looked toward the impossible doorway, suspended beyond the fractured sky. The silhouette hadn't moved. Yet I felt its attention settle over me like cold rain, not hostile, not compassionate, simply certain. It wasn't deciding who I was. It already knew. The footsteps beneath heaven stopped. An impossible stillness followed. Then, every gate in the distance opened, just a little. Not enough for someone to pass through, only enough for light to escape. Thousands of thin lines of white stretched across the horizon. From where I stood, they looked like cracks in reality. The old man inhaled sharply. "No," the old woman whispered. "They've answered." I looked between them. "The gates are opening again." "No," the old man corrected me. "They're listening." The child lowered the white key. His expression had changed. Until now, he had seemed almost peaceful. Now, he looked frightened. Not for himself, for me. "You don't have much time. What happens if I remember?" He didn't answer. Instead, he asked, "What happens when a dream remembers the dreamer?" "I don't know." Neither did we. The other me slowly stepped beside me. For the first time since we'd met, he wasn't looking at heaven. He was looking at Earth, at the faint blue sphere still visible beyond the distant towers. "So small, Mom," he whispered, "so fragile. You miss it?" He smiled sadly. "Every day. I thought heaven had no sorrow." "It doesn't." He looked at me. "We brought ours with us." A sound drifted across the city. Not bells, voices, thousands of them, praying, not from heaven, from earth. Every prayer rose like a thread of light, passing through the great gates before disappearing into the sky. Most faded. Some burned brightly. One reached the courtyard. It stopped directly in front of me. A thin strand of golden light. I instinctively reached toward it. The old woman didn't stop me. The moment my fingers touched it, I heard a voice, a woman, crying, "God, please don't let him die." My heart lurched. I knew that voice. Emily, my wife. The courtyard vanished. For a heartbeat, I was back in the hospital. Machines screamed. Doctors rushed around my bed. A nurse shouted, "We're losing him." Emily clutched my hand so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Tears streamed down her face. She kept repeating the same words. "Please come back. Please. I can't lose you." The vision dissolved. I found myself back beneath the barren tree. My knees gave way. I collapsed onto the white stone. My voice broke. She was still waiting. The old man nodded. She never stopped. The child watched quietly. "You heard one thread. Every prayer reaches a gate." And then he looked toward the city. "Someone answers." The old man lowered his eyes. Or tries to. The silhouette inside the impossible doorway moved. Only once. It raised one arm. Nothing more. Yet every thread of prayer in the sky suddenly froze. Not snapped. Not vanished. Stopped. The countless strands of light hung motionless above heaven. The old woman gasped. "It touched the current." The old man's face filled with dread. "It shouldn't be able to." The other me whispered, "It can now." A low crack echoed through the city, then another. The great gates weren't closing anymore. They were changing. The brilliant white stone darkened, not into black, but into something colorless, like memories fading before they disappear forever. One by one, the names carved above each gate dissolved. Not erased, forgotten. I tried to read one. The letters shifted every time I focused on them. My mind couldn't hold them. The child suddenly grabbed my wrist. His hand was warm, wonderfully, impossibly warm. "You have one chance." "For what?" "To choose correctly. I don't even know what I'm choosing." His eyes filled with tears. I know. Then tell me. I can't. Why? Because his voice trembled. The first promise only counts if no one explains it. The warmth beneath my chest, the place where the black feather had disappeared, began to spread. Slowly, across my ribs, up my neck, into my thoughts. Memories I had never lived flickered behind my eyes. Cities built from light, rivers flowing upward into stars, voices speaking my name before the world had oceans. The old man looked at me with growing horror. The seal is breaking. The other me reached for me. We're too late. The child stepped backward. I'm sorry. For what? He looked directly into my eyes. For asking you to keep your promise. Before I could answer, the impossible silhouette beyond the sky spoke for the first time. It didn't use words. It spoke my name. And the moment I heard it, I remembered the face I had before I was ever born. The name echoed through me, not around me, not inside my mind. Through me, like a bell struck at the center of my existence. It wasn't my human name, not the one my parents had whispered when I was born, not the one my wife had spoken through tears beside a hospital bed. This name was older, so old that hearing it felt less like remembering a word and more like remembering gravity. The instant it was spoken, the world stopped. The crack in the sky froze. The drifting threads of prayer became motionless. Even the dust hanging in the air refused to fall. Time hadn't stopped. Something more fundamental had. Choice. The old man stared at me in horror. No, he whispered. It found the true name. The other me closed his eyes. I hoped it never would. The child looked down, not because he was ashamed, because he couldn't bear to watch. I'm sorry. His voice trembled. I truly believed you'd have longer. Suddenly, the memories came, not fragments, not flashes, an ocean. I wasn't standing in heaven anymore. I stood in a place before heaven. There was no sky, no stars, only endless white, stretching beyond imagination. Countless beings surrounded me. None had faces, none needed them. They knew one another completely. There was no speech, only understanding. In the center stood a gate, unlike any I had seen. It wasn't built. It simply existed, closed, waiting. Someone stood beside me. I couldn't see their face, yet I trusted them more deeply than I had ever trusted anyone. They asked only one question. If the gate must close, who will remain outside? Silence. No one answered. Not because they were afraid, because they understood what the question truly meant. Then, I stepped forward. Not bravely, not heroically, quietly. I heard my own voice. I will. The memory shattered. I fell to my knees in the courtyard. Every breath burned. No, I whispered. I said that. The child knelt beside me. Yes. I chose. Yes. Why would I do that? His answer was barely audible. Because no one else could. The old man looked as though the weight of eternity had settled upon him. It wasn't supposed to happen. The old woman nodded. The promise was never meant to be remembered. The other me laughed, not from joy, from despair. And yet, he looked directly at me. Here we are again. Again, that word struck me harder than anything else. I looked at him. What do you mean, again? He slowly approached. For the first time, he didn't seem like another version of me. He seemed older, not in years, in cycles. He stopped only inches away, then quietly asked, Do you know why I look like you? I shook my head, his eyes filled with tears. Because, I am what happens when you leave. The courtyard vanished. Not physically, in memory. I saw another heaven, whole, untouched. Its gates open, its rivers alive. Then, I saw myself walking toward one of the great gates. Behind me stood the old man, the old woman, the child. Thousands of silent figures. No one tried to stop me. Because they couldn't. I placed one hand against the gate. It opened. Beyond it, there was only darkness. I stepped through. The gate closed behind me. The memory ended. Back in the courtyard, my hands were shaking uncontrollably. I left. The other me nodded. You did? And you... I stayed. No. A sad smile crossed his face. I became the one who remembered. The old man suddenly looked toward the fractured sky. His expression changed instantly. Everyone down. Before anyone could react, a deafening sound rolled across heaven. Not from above. From every direction. Like an endless chorus taking its first breath. The silhouette inside the impossible doorway stepped forward. Only one step. It still hadn't crossed into heaven. It didn't need to. That single step caused every remaining gate across the endless city to begin closing at once. One after another. Hundreds. Thousands. The sound was unbearable. The end of welcome. The end of return. The end of hope. The child looked up at me, tears streaming silently down his face. Then he whispered the words that made my blood run cold. This time, you're not the last man to leave heaven. He swallowed. You're the first one who came back. The child's words shattered something inside me. You're the first one who came back? No one corrected him. The old man didn't deny it. The old woman didn't close her eyes. Even the other me said nothing. Because there was nothing left to deny. The gates continued closing, one after another. Each impact echoed through heaven like the heartbeat of a dying world. Except, something changed. I listened carefully. The first gates had sounded heavy. The next had sounded distant. Now, each closing gate sounded familiar, uncomfortably familiar, like doors I'd heard before. A front door, a church door, a classroom door, a hospital room. Every closing gate carried the sound of a door from my own life. I looked at the old man. Why do they sound like that? His answer came almost reluctantly. They're choosing memories you can survive. What would they sound like otherwise? He held my gaze. You would hear creation ending. The impossible silhouette beyond the fractured sky took another step. Still, it did not cross the threshold. It simply stood within the vast doorway, waiting. Its outline refused to stay human. Every few seconds it changed. A shepherd, a king, a mother carrying a child, an old blind man, a soldier, a frightened little girl, thousands of lives, thousands of faces. None remained long enough to recognize. Then, for one heartbeat, it became me. Not the man I was now, not the man who had left heaven, someone older than both, someone whose eyes carried entire ages. The image disappeared immediately, but it was enough. The warmth beneath my chest became pain. I cried out, not because something hurt physically, because another memory had broken free. I wasn't in heaven. I wasn't on earth. I stood before an endless sea, not water, light, Every wave carried voices, millions of them. Every soul that had ever prayed, every child who had ever cried. Every final breath whispered in hope. The sea answered them all. Standing beside me was the little boy. Only he wasn't a child there. He shone like the dawn. His face was still gentle, but impossibly ancient. He looked at the endless sea. They're waiting. For what? For someone to remember the first promise. The memory dissolved. I found myself gasping on the white stone. The child in the courtyard still looked like a 6-year-old boy. But now, when I looked into his eyes, I saw the same endless sea. The same ancient sorrow. You? I whispered. You've always looked like this. He smiled sadly. No. You've always remembered me like this. The old woman suddenly turned toward the city. They're here. The old man followed her gaze. From every street, people were emerging. For the first time since my arrival, heaven was no longer empty. Thousands. No, millions. They walked silently through the white avenues. None looked afraid. None looked confused. Each walked toward the central plaza with calm purpose. Their faces reflected every culture, every century, every language. Children, elders, kings, beggars, scientists, farmers, artists, soldiers, ordinary people, all moving together, none speaking. Who are they? I asked. The old man answered quietly. They stayed. Stayed? When you left? He swallowed. They chose not to. The other me closed his eyes. I never wanted you to see this. The endless procession stopped. Every soul turned toward me. Not the sky, not the fracture. Me. Millions of eyes. One silence then, without anyone speaking. Every person placed a hand over their heart. The gesture spread across the city like a wave. I didn't understand until I noticed something impossible. Tiny lights began leaving their chests, one from every soul. They floated upward, not toward the fractured sky, toward me. The old man's face drained of color. They remember. The old woman whispered, too soon. The lights surrounded me, warm, gentle. Each carried a feeling, a laugh, a kindness, a forgiveness, a sacrifice, not memories I owned. Memories entrusted to me, the warmth inside my chest answered them. The black feather beneath my skin stirred. For the first time, I heard two voices. One whispered from the light, "Stay." The other whispered from somewhere impossibly distant beyond the fractured sky, "Return." The two words collided inside my soul. Stay, return. Heaven held its breath. Earth continued praying. The gates stood half closed, and I realized with a certainty that terrified me more than anything I'd yet experienced. The fate of heaven had never depended on the thing beyond the sky. It had always depended on which word I chose to answer. The word hung inside me. Stay. Return. Neither voice grew louder. Neither tried to overpower the other. That was the most unsettling part. Whatever choice waited before me, it would be mine. Not forced, not manipulated, chosen. The old man slowly approached until he stood beside me. For the first time since we'd met, he looked afraid to speak. When the first promise was made, he said quietly, We believed sacrifice would end the story. His eyes lifted toward the impossible doorway beyond the fractured sky. We were wrong. It only began it. The lights surrounding me continued to rise. Thousands, millions. Each one circled me once before drifting toward the white key still suspended between the child and me. The key began changing. Hairline cracks appeared across its smooth surface. Not damage. Writing. Ancient symbols emerged as if they had always been hidden beneath the metal. I couldn't read them. Yet somehow, I understood them, not with language, with memory. The key had never been made to lock a door. It had been made to choose one. The child watched me carefully. You remember what it opens now? I swallowed. No. Then the memory came anyway. A vast hallway, endless doors, some glowing, some broken, some sealed forever. Only one remained unlocked. The white door, the one I'd seen in the hospital, the one I'd stepped through before my heart stopped. Only now, I remembered something I hadn't before. I hadn't opened it. It had opened because it recognized me. The memory shattered. I nearly collapsed again. The other me caught my arm. You remember the hall? I nodded weakly. I've seen it. His expression darkened. Then we're almost out of time. For what? Before he could answer, the white city shook, not from below, from above. Everyone looked toward the fracture. The impossible doorway was opening wider, slowly, silently, like dawn in reverse. And through that widening opening, more silhouettes appeared, not monsters, not angels, people, countless human figures standing in absolute stillness. None crossed the threshold. They simply waited, watching. Who are they? The old woman answered. The unreturned. The phrase chilled me. The dead? She slowly shook her head. No. The forgotten. The procession of souls throughout heaven remained perfectly still. Millions of faces, millions of eyes, every one fixed upon me. Then something extraordinary happened. One elderly woman stepped out of the crowd. She smiled. I knew that smile. Impossible. It was my grandmother. She had died when I was 12. She said nothing. She simply placed her hand over her heart and bowed. Then another figure stepped forward. My father. Gone for nearly 20 years, he smiled exactly the same way, then bowed. One by one, faces from my life emerged from the endless multitude. Teachers, neighbors, friends. People whose funerals I had attended. People whose names I'd forgotten. Every one of them acknowledged me, not as a hero, not as a savior, as someone carrying something unbearably heavy. Tears filled my eyes. They know me, the old man answered softly. They remember. A deep vibration rolled through the city. The white key floated higher. Every light surrounding it suddenly rushed inward. The key unfolded, not mechanically, organically. Its shape expanded into something impossible. It became a map, not of earth, not of heaven, a map of doors. Millions upon millions of tiny points connected by luminous threads. Every soul, every prayer, every birth, every death, every choice, all connected, and one thread, black, moving slowly, patiently, crossing the entire map. Wherever it passed, the lights dimmed. The old man stared in horror. It found the path, the other me whispered. It never found it before. The child looked at me. You see it now. I nodded. What is it? It's following? He paused. Every promise that was broken. The black thread continued moving. Each time it crossed another line, one light disappeared. Not extinguished, forgotten. I watched in helpless silence, then I noticed something that froze my blood. The black thread wasn't wandering. It was coming toward me. The warmth beneath my skin suddenly became unbearable. I clutched my chest. The mark of the black feather flared beneath the surface. For one terrifying moment, I heard both voices again. The first gentle as ever. Stay. The second vast enough to make heaven itself seem small. Return. Then a third voice, one I had never heard before. Quiet, almost broken. It came from somewhere inside me. It whispered only 4 words. You already chose once. The child closed his eyes. The old man lowered his head. The other me looked at me with heartbreaking compassion, because they all understood something I had not yet fully accepted. This wasn't the moment of the decision. It was the moment I finally remembered making it. The words settled over the city. You already chose once? No one moved. No one spoke. It was as if all of heaven had been waiting, not for a decision, but for me to remember that one had already been made. The millions of souls surrounding the courtyard lowered their heads together, not in worship, not in grief, in remembrance. The old man closed his eyes. It has returned. The old woman quietly corrected him. No, he has. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. The warmth beneath my skin spread through every vein. The black feather wasn't burning me. It was opening something. Not in my body, in my memory. The city around me faded. The white towers dissolved. The impossible doorway disappeared. Even the crack in the sky became transparent. Only one place remained, the hall. It stretched farther than sight itself. An endless corridor without walls, without ceiling, without floor. Yet I stood upon it. Doors floated in every direction. Some were no larger than a child's hand. Others towered like mountains. Each pulsed gently, alive. Every door represented a choice. Every choice represented a life. Every life represented a promise. I somehow knew this. No one explained it. I remembered it. Footsteps echoed behind me. I turned. The child was there, not as the 6-year-old I'd met beneath the barren tree. He stood taller now, perhaps 12. His white clothing shimmered softly. His eyes no longer carried sadness, only patience. You remember this place? I do. You built part of it? I frowned. I built. The hall remembers every keeper. The word struck something deep inside me. Keeper, not man, not angel, keeper. Before I could ask another question, a door opened by itself, softly, silently. Light poured through it. Inside, I saw Earth, not today's Earth. The Earth on the day I died, the hospital room. Emily asleep beside my bed. Days had passed. Machines still breathed for me. Doctors had nearly given up, yet she remained. Her wedding ring caught the afternoon sunlight. She held my hand, even in sleep. She hadn't let go. I reached toward the doorway. My fingers passed through the light. I couldn't touch her, but I felt her heartbeat. The child watched quietly. They never stopped calling. Another door opened. This one revealed something entirely different. The moment I looked inside, my blood froze. The gate, not heaven's gate, the first gate. The one from before creation, it stood alone in endless white, closed. Exactly as I remembered, except it wasn't empty anymore. Someone stood before it, hands resting against its surface, waiting. I leaned closer. The figure slowly turned. My breath stopped. It wasn't me. Not exactly. It was someone who carried my face the way an old cathedral carries echoes. Older, wiser, unimaginably tired. His eyes met mine. He smiled sadly. Then he spoke words that no one else seemed able to hear. "I've been waiting for you to remember why I never came back." The hall vanished. I was back beneath the barren tree. Only a heartbeat had passed. Yet everything had changed. The old man looked at me with cautious hope. "You saw him?" I nodded. "The first keeper." The title echoed inside the courtyard. Even the millions gathered throughout heaven lifted their heads. The old woman whispered, "So he still stands." The other me looked stunned. I thought he was gone. The crack in the sky pulsed violently. The impossible doorway widened again. This time, something crossed, not fully, a single foot. It touched the edge of heaven. The white stone blackened beneath it, not corrupted, forgotten. Entire sections of the city disappeared without collapsing. Buildings, gardens, streets, gone, not destroyed. No one remembered they had ever existed. I looked where they had stood. My mind found only empty space. Nothing felt missing until I realized that was exactly what forgetting felt like. The child grabbed my arm. His voice was urgent for the first time. "Look away." "Why?" "If you watch it erase something, it can erase the one watching." I tore my eyes away from the advancing darkness. Too late. A single name vanished from my thoughts. I knew I had forgotten someone important. I tried desperately to remember. A face, a laugh, a voice. Nothing. Only absence. The panic hit instantly. What did I lose? The old man didn't answer. He couldn't, because he had forgotten too. The old woman pressed trembling fingers against her temple. Tears filled her eyes. We've already begun forgetting each other. Across heaven, millions of souls suddenly looked around in quiet confusion. Some searched the faces beside them. Some reached for hands they no longer recognized. Some whispered names that no longer existed. And beyond the widening doorway, the silhouette took another step. Not into heaven, toward the hall, toward the first gate, toward the promise that even eternity had failed to keep. The child's warning came too late. Across the endless city, confusion spread like a silent tide. Not panic, not terror, something far worse. People stopped in the middle of conversations that no longer existed. Mothers looked at faces they knew they loved, but could no longer remember why. Friends embraced strangers whose names had dissolved only moments before. Entire histories vanished without leaving scars. That was horror. Nothing felt missing. Until you tried to remember, the old woman suddenly cried out. It was the first time I had heard genuine pain in her voice. She staggered against the barren tree, one hand pressed against her temple. The other reached into empty air. "No," she whispered. I've lost. Her lips continued moving. No sound came. Not because she refused to speak, because whatever name she had tried to say no longer existed. Tears streamed down her face. She wasn't mourning someone. She was mourning the ability to mourn them. The old man hurried toward her. He caught her before she fell. What was it? She looked at him helplessly. She searched desperately. I know there was... Her breathing became uneven. Someone. The old man closed his eyes. I remember forgetting. He opened them again. But I no longer remember who. The realization struck me with terrifying clarity. This wasn't destruction. It was subtraction. Reality wasn't being broken. It was becoming smaller. Every forgotten person, every forgotten place, every forgotten promise made existence itself just a little less complete. The child tightened his grip on my arm. Listen carefully. His voice had lost all gentleness. If you lose your first memory, he stopped. You can never return. My first memory? No. The first memory that belongs to you. I frowned. I don't understand. You will. He looked toward the hall, invisible to everyone but me now. When the hall calls. Suddenly, the warmth inside my chest became unbearable. The black feather beneath my skin unfolded, not physically, spiritually. I felt something open inside me, not a wound, a door. A rush of memories poured through it, not human memories, older ones. 1,000 lifetimes compressed into a single heartbeat. I remembered standing beside stars before they burned. I remembered hearing the first prayer ever spoken. I remembered watching oceans appear where there had once been only silence. I remembered names that could shape galaxies. Then, every memory stopped. One remained. The first gate, closed, silent, waiting. Standing before it was the first keeper. He hadn't moved, not even once. He slowly lifted his head. This time, he looked directly at me. His eyes held neither fear nor hope, only relief. He spoke without moving his lips. His voice arrived inside my soul. You finally remember why I stayed. The hall trembled. Behind him, something moved, not beyond the gate. Within it, like an enormous shadow turning in its sleep. Back in heaven, every remaining bell rang at once, not in warning, in recognition. The old man looked toward the horizon. It's awake. The child slowly nodded. No. It knows he's awake. The distinction froze everyone. The impossible silhouette beyond the fractured sky took another step. Its foot never touched heaven. Yet another entire district of the city disappeared, not crumbled, not consumed, simply ceased to have ever been. I looked toward the empty space. My mind refused to ask what had stood there. That frightened me more than the loss itself. Then, every soul across heaven did something unexpected. Millions of people turned away from the fractured sky, away from the darkness, away from the disappearing city. They all faced the hall, though none of them could see it. One by one, they knelt, not to worship, to remember. The old woman whispered through tears, "They're giving him their memories." The old man looked at me. "They're trying to strengthen yours." I suddenly understood the lights that had surrounded me. They weren't power. They weren't souls. They were memories entrusted to a keeper, not to own, to protect. The warmth inside my chest changed. The black feather recoiled. For the first time since entering me, it seemed afraid. The child smiled faintly. It doesn't feed on memory. It feeds on abandonment. A deep, ancient voice rolled through the hall. Not from the first keeper, from behind the first gate. It spoke only one sentence, so old that even heaven trembled hearing it. Who remembers the one who closed the gate? The question echoed through every street, every tower, every soul. The old man lowered his head. The old woman covered her face. The other me looked at me with tears in his eyes, because none of them knew the answer anymore. Only one person still could. Me. And as the memory rose toward the surface, I realized with horror that remembering it might save heaven or open the first gate forever. The question hung over heaven. Who remembers the one who closed the gate? No voice answered. Not from the millions gathered in the city. Not from the old man. Not from the woman beneath the barren tree. Not even from the first keeper, standing beyond memory itself. Only silence. It was the kind of silence that exists when every possible answer has already been forgotten. Then, I remembered a sound. Not a face, not a name, a heartbeat, slow, steady, older than stars. It echoed somewhere behind my own. For a brief instant, my heartbeat matched it perfectly. 1, 2, 3, then separated again. The child looked at me with widening eyes. You hear him? The old man slowly turned. You've never heard that before? The child shook his head. No keeper ever did. The warmth beneath my chest suddenly vanished, not because the black feather had disappeared, because something else had awakened beneath it. Light. Not brilliant, not blinding, quiet, like the glow of a candle in an endless cathedral. The feather recoiled. For the first time, I felt fear that wasn't mine. It came from the feather itself. It remembers. The shadow beyond the fractured sky spoke those words, not loudly, not angrily, curiously, as though observing an unexpected result. The impossible doorway trembled. The countless silhouettes standing behind it slowly lowered their heads, not in reverence, in recognition. The first keeper finally moved, for what felt like the first time in eternity. He removed one hand from the first gate. Nothing happened. The gate remained closed. The shadow within it remained asleep. Yet heaven itself shook. The old woman whispered. He let go. The old man stared in disbelief. I thought he couldn't. The hall stretched endlessly before me once more. This time I walked. No one told me to. Every step felt strangely familiar, as though I had walked this path countless times before, and doors drifted past on either side. Each contained a life, a beginning, an ending, a promise kept, a promise broken. Then I reached the first keeper, up close. He no longer looked like me, nor like anyone else. His face shifted constantly. Every generation, every language, every nation, every soul that had ever chosen sacrifice flickered across his features. I finally understood. He wasn't one person. He carried all who had stood in his place. He smiled. You've remembered enough. Not everything. No. He looked back at the gate. And that's why there's still hope. Who closed it? The question escaped me before I realized I'd spoken. For a long time, he didn't answer. Then he turned. His eyes carried a sorrow deeper than heaven. No one, I frowned. But the gate cannot be closed? He gently rested his hand against the ancient surface. It can only be held. The realization struck me like lightning. You mean, he nodded. It has never been locked. It has never been sealed. It has only, his voice almost broke, been held shut. Every memory I'd recovered suddenly rearranged itself. The promise, the hall, the keepers, leaving heaven, returning. None of it had been about guarding a door. It had been about replacing the one holding it. One keeper after another, across ages beyond counting, not prison guards, volunteers, back in heaven. The old man looked toward me as if he could somehow sense the truth. His lips trembled. He knows. The child quietly began crying, not from fear, from relief. You finally know. The impossible silhouette beyond the fractured sky took another step. This time, its hand reached toward the widening doorway, not toward heaven, toward the hall, toward the first gate. The first keeper looked over his shoulder. There isn't much time. I'll help you. He smiled sadly. I know. I'll take your place. His smile disappeared. You already did. The hall dissolved. I found myself back beneath the barren tree. The warmth inside my chest had become certainty. I looked at the old man. The gate isn't closed. He slowly nodded. No. It's being held. Tears filled his eyes. At last, someone remembers? Across heaven, millions of souls lifted their heads together. Every remaining bell fell silent. The crack in the sky stopped widening. Even the impossible silhouette paused, as if all of creation itself were waiting to hear what I would say next. The words formed before I realized I was speaking. They were never locking anything. My voice carried across the silent city. They were keeping a promise. The moment the sentence left my lips, every remaining bell rang once. Only once. The sound wasn't loud. It was relieved. Across heaven, millions of souls slowly closed their eyes. Some smiled, some wept. Some simply stood motionless, as though an unbearable weight had finally been given a name. The impossible silhouette beyond the fractured sky tilted its head. For the first time, it reacted, not with anger, not with triumph, with recognition. So, his voice rolled across existence. Someone still remembers? The old man dropped to one knee. The old woman followed. Then every soul throughout heaven knelt. Not before me, before the promise. The child remained standing. He looked at me with tears glistening in his ancient eyes. You've restored the memory. I shook my head. No. I've only remembered it, he smiled. That's how restoration begins. The warmth beneath my chest spread through my entire body. The black feather was still there. I could feel it, but it was no longer alone. Light surrounded it, not attacking it, containing it. The feather no longer felt like an invader. It felt trapped. The old man noticed immediately. It cannot grow. Why? I asked. He looked at my heart. Because you stopped fearing what you had forgotten. The impossible doorway trembled. The countless silent figures standing behind it slowly began stepping backward, one after another, as though some invisible tide were pulling them away. Only the silhouette remained, still watching, still waiting. Then it laughed. not mockingly, softly, almost with admiration. I wondered how long it would take. The hall appeared again, only this time it wasn't empty. Doors were opening everywhere, thousands, millions. Each released a single thread of light. The threads drifted upward, not toward heaven, toward the first gate. The first keeper watched them arrive. His tired face softened. They remember. I stepped beside him. What happens now? He looked at the gate. We become stronger. Strong enough? He didn't answer. Instead, he slowly removed both hands from the gate. My breath caught. Nothing happened. The gate remained shut. The shadow behind it did not stir. I stared in disbelief. How? The first keeper smiled. I was never holding it alone. The hall brightened. Every thread of light wrapped gently around the ancient gate. Not chains, not locks, promises. Millions upon millions of promises. Every act of sacrifice. Every kindness never repaid. Every prayer whispered for someone else instead of oneself. Every parent who gave their life for a child. Every stranger who chose mercy over hatred. Every forgotten hero. Every quiet act of love. The gate wasn't held shut by strength. It was held by all of them. Back beneath the barren tree, the old woman began to laugh through her tears. I remember. The old man looked at her. So do I. What? I asked. She smiled. The first name I lost. What was it? She gently shook her head. I still can't say it, but I remember loving it. The answer carried a strange peace. Some things, I realized, could return without ever becoming fully known again. The silhouette beyond the fractured sky slowly raised one hand. The crack across heaven stopped widening. Silence fell. Then it spoke. One final sentence. Not to heaven, not to the keepers. Only to me. When your memory becomes complete, come find me. The impossible doorway slowly began closing, not because it had been forced, because it had chosen to leave, one by one. The countless figures beyond it disappeared. The crack narrowed. The blackness retreated. The stars returned. For the first time since my arrival, heaven breathed. The child looked toward earth. Your wife is still waiting. The words struck my heart. Emily. I had almost forgotten. No, I had remembered. The hall shimmered around me one last time. The first keeper placed a hand on my shoulder. You now know why you left. I nodded. And why I came back. He smiled sadly. No, you've only remembered half. I frowned. Half? He looked toward a door I hadn't noticed before. Unlike every other door, it was made of ordinary wood, the kind you might find in a small house, a brass handle, a scratch near the bottom. It looked familiar, painfully familiar. I stepped closer. My breath stopped. It was the front door of my own home. The first keeper whispered, "The greatest gate you will ever choose was never in heaven." He slowly reached for the handle, then stopped. "You must open this one yourself." The wooden door creaked open by a single inch. Warm sunlight spilled through the gap. And from somewhere beyond it, I heard Emily's voice, very softly, almost as if she were standing beside my hospital bed. "If you can hear me, come home." Emily's voice lingered. "If you can hear me, come home." The words echoed through the hall, not as sound, as warmth. The wooden door remained slightly open. Golden afternoon light spilled across the endless white floor. I smelled fresh rain, coffee, the faint scent of lavender. Home, for the first time since entering heaven. I wanted to cry. I took one step toward the door. The child didn't stop me, neither did the old man nor the old woman. Only the first keeper spoke. If you open that door, I paused. You must understand what you're choosing. I thought I already chose. You did. This is the second promise. The second promise? He nodded. The first was for heaven. He looked toward the wooden door. The second is for earth. Behind the door, I could hear hospital monitors, a chair scraping softly across the floor. Emily's quiet breathing. She hadn't left, not once. Days had become weeks. Weeks had become months. Yet she remained beside a man the world believed would never wake. I reached toward the brass handle. Before my fingers touched it, a voice behind me whispered, "Wait." I turned. The impossible silhouette had returned. Not beyond the fractured sky. Not inside heaven. It stood at the very end of the hall, still impossibly distant, still impossible to understand, yet closer than ever before. "You cannot have both." Its voice carried no threat, only certainty. "If you return," it gestured toward the wooden door, "you will forget." The hall became silent. The child lowered his head. The old man closed his eyes. The first keeper said nothing. I looked back toward the silhouette. "What will I forget?" "It depends." "On what?" "What you love most." The words struck harder than any wound. Emily, heaven, the promise, the hall, everything I'd remembered, everything I'd fought to understand. The silhouette continued. "No human mind can carry both worlds. You know this." The first keeper quietly nodded. "It's true." My chest tightened. "So if I go home, you will awaken, and you will remember enough to live." "Not enough to explain." The child looked at me with tears in his eyes. "You'll know that love matters. You'll know that promises matter. But," his voice broke, "you may never remember why." I looked at the first keeper. "And if I stay?" He didn't answer immediately. "Finally, you become me." Silence. "You remain here. You remember everything. You hold the first gate. For as long as creation needs someone to remember." The wooden door swung open another inch. Emily's voice came again, stronger this time. "I know you're still here." She was crying. "I don't care if you can't hear me. I'm gonna keep talking. I promised." The words shattered me. She had made a promise too. The hall trembled. The first gate groaned, not because it was opening, because the one who had held it for eternity slowly stepped away. He stood beside me. For the first time, he looked peaceful. "I've been waiting longer than stars have existed," he smiled. "I'm tired." I looked into his eyes, then toward the wooden door, then toward the endless gate. 2 promises, 2 worlds, 1 choice. Suddenly, the child laughed, a real laugh, bright, gentle, exactly the same laugh I'd heard in the force when I was 6 years old. I looked at him. "You led me out." He nodded. "Yes." "Why?" "Because," he smiled, "the world still needed you." Everything became clear. Not every mystery, not every memory, just the one that mattered. The first promise had never been about imprisoning darkness. It had been about ensuring that someone always chose love over fear. Whether that love guarded heaven or returned to earth, the promise remained the same. I smiled through my tears. Then I looked at the first keeper. I know what I'm going to do. He searched my face for a long moment. He said nothing. Then he smiled, not sadly, proudly. I knew you would. He stepped aside. The hall fell completely silent. I reached for the wooden door. My hand closed around the brass handle. Behind it, Emily whispered one last time. Please come back to me. The handle turned. The hospital monitor let out one long, continuous tone. Then, a single heartbeat. Beep. Darkness exploded into light. I opened my eyes. Emily was there, her head resting beside my hand. The monitor beside the bed showed a steady rhythm. A nurse screamed for the doctors. Emily slowly lifted her head. For a long second, she simply stared. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Then tears flooded her eyes. You came home. I smiled weakly. I promised. She threw her arms around me, laughing and crying at the same time. Outside the hospital window, the morning sun rose over the city, somewhere beyond sight, far beyond clouds, beyond stars, beyond memory. A single ancient gate remained closed, and an old keeper, no longer alone, smiled into eternity. The end.